Let me tell you something about silence value and the power a woman holds when she finally understands her worth. See, when a man ignores you, when he disappears, when he decides you're optional, that's not just a moment, that's information. That's a glimpse into how he thinks you're supposed to feel about yourself. And when he comes strolling back like nothing ever happened, acting like the door is supposed to swing open because he showed up again, that is the moment that defines you, not him. When you talk about how to respond when a man comes back after ignoring you, the first thing you must understand is this: your silence teaches louder than any explanation ever could. Silence is a language. It's not emptiness, it's not passiveness, and it's not weakness. Silence is power because it forces someone to sit with the consequences of their own actions. When you stop explaining why you deserve better, when you stop begging for clarity, when you stop asking why he disappeared, that silence becomes an answer he'd have to face. People get loud when they feel secure in your presence. They only get quiet when they realize they might lose access. And your silence is exactly what makes him realize that he can't take your presence for granted anymore. Your silence is the mirror that reflects back to him the reality he tried to ignore. When you didn't call, when you didn't chase, when you didn't show up asking for closure, your silence told him everything. It told him you respect yourself. It told him you're not desperate. It told him you're capable of walking away. And nothing wakes up a man faster than the fear of being replaced. That's why your silence matters so deeply, because it teaches without you having to speak a single word. The second keynote is that when he comes back, your standards must speak before your emotions. Emotions will always want to respond first. Your heart wants to hear from him, wants to feel chosen again, wants to feel noticed, wants to feel seen. But your standards are the only thing that protects you from repeating the same cycle. Standards are not about being rude or showing attitude. Standards are about honoring yourself. A man can only rise to the level you set. If your standard allows him to disappear and return whenever he feels like it, then that is the behavior he will continue to deliver. If your standard allows inconsistency, inconsistency becomes the norm. If your standard allows disrespect, disrespect becomes familiar. But when your standard is high, not unrealistic, just high, it forces him to understand that access to you is not automatic. It is earned. It is maintained. It is valued. And when he comes back, he shouldn't be met with emotion. He should be met with a standard that shows him your heart is strong, your boundaries are real, and your worth isn't negotiable. The third key note is simple but powerful. A man values what he fears losing. That doesn't mean you play games. It doesn't mean you manipulate. And it doesn't mean you try to make him jealous. It means you live your life in such a way that he knows your world does not revolve around him. He's not returning because he suddenly discovered a new piece of information about you. He's returning because he felt the difference your absence made. He felt the shift when you stopped trying, when you stopped reaching out, when you stopped giving energy that wasn't reciprocated. Men think they can do better until they realize what better really meant was what you already gave. So when he comes back, it's not the time to celebrate. It's time to observe. Does he value you now? Is he afraid to lose you again? Is he willing to show effort, real consistent effort, or is he simply hoping for the comfort of the woman he once took for granted? A man's sincerity is measured in his actions, not his words. And when he fears losing you, he talks differently. He shows up differently. Your job is to watch carefully, not fall blindly. The fourth keynote, the response you choose determines the respect you receive. Not the words you say, but the energy behind them. If your response shows that you were waiting by the door for him to return, he will treat you accordingly. If your response shows that you didn't learn anything from the disappointment he caused, the cycle will repeat. But if your response shows strength, self-respect, and emotional maturity, that's when everything changes. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to punish him. Your power comes from neutrality, calm, composure. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're simply not the same woman he left. That difference alone demands respect. When you respond with clarity instead of emotion, when you respond with questions that require accountability, when you respond from a place of self-worth, he feels that shift instantly. And that shift either motivates him to rise to your level, or it exposes that he never truly deserved you in the first place. Every woman must understand that the moment he comes back after ignoring you is not a romantic moment. It's a test. A moment where your growth meets his return. A moment where your silence meets his confusion. A moment where your standards meet his intentions. And the way you respond determines everything that happens next. Not because you're trying to control him, but because you're controlling yourself. A woman who can control herself can control the entire situation. When you respond in power, the dynamic changes. When you respond strategically, the energy shifts. And when you respond from a place of worth, he has no choice but to either rise or leave. And either outcome is a win for you. When a man comes back after ignoring you, the moment might feel emotional, confusing, or even flattering, but that's exactly why you must pause and remember the first truth: silence taught him more than your words ever could. People don't change because you lecture them. They don't learn because you explain your pain. They change when circumstances force them to face the reality of what they lost. Your silence was that force. It wasn't a punishment, it was clarity. When you fell quiet, he had to sit in the empty space when your effort used to be. He had to sit with the absence of your good morning messages, your check-ins, your encouragement. He had to sit with the sudden lack of validation that he used to get so easily. And in that space, he realized something that women often underestimate: your presence was valuable, and your absence is louder than any argument you could have made. Silence is a teacher. It teaches accountability. It teaches respect. It teaches a man to stop believing that he can disappear without consequences. When you went quiet, you didn't lose anything he did, and that loss is what brought him back to your door. But returning doesn't automatically erase what happened. And this is where your standards must step forward before your emotions even have the chance to speak. Your standards are the filter through which you protect your heart, your peace, and your future. When he comes back acting like everything is normal or hoping you'll slip right back into old habits, your standards must interrupt that pattern. That means not letting excitement override your intelligence. That means not letting affection silence the reality of what he did. That means not letting his words cloud your memory of his actions. When a woman leads with emotion, she slips back into cycles. But when she leads with standards, she creates new rules for how she will be treated. A standard might be asking for consistency before commitment. It might be requesting honesty instead of assumptions. It might be wanting effort instead of intentions. These aren't tests, these are boundaries. And if he says he's truly back, truly changed, and truly aware of his mistake, then meeting your standards should not feel like a burden. It should feel like the natural next step. Now, here's the part most women don't always understand. A man values what he fears losing. That's not manipulation. That's human nature. Think about it. People don't protect what they take for granted. They protect what they believe can slip through their fingers. When he ignored you, he didn't fear losing you. He assumed you'd wait. He assumed you'd still be there. He assumed you'd still try. But when you went silent, you introduced him to a reality he never expected. You're not the kind of woman who stays available to someone who treats her like an option. And that realization awakened something in him. Men don't reflect when things are easy. They reflect when something changes. Your absence changed the whole dynamic. He felt it in the empty calls. He felt it when he got ready to send a message and realized he hadn't heard from you in weeks. He felt it when he thought about you and wondered if someone else was now valuing what he ignored. And when a man begins to fear being replaced, he begins to remember everything he took for granted. That fear is what makes him come back. But returning alone doesn't mean he understands your worth. That part comes from how you respond. And that leads directly into the fourth keynote: the response you choose determines the respect you receive. Respect doesn't come from anger. It doesn't come from dramatic reactions. It doesn't come from yelling about how he hurt you. Respect is earned when you respond calmly, confidently, and clearly. A woman's strength is not proven by how loud she is. It's proven by how steady she remains. When he reaches out, the response he gets should tell him that the version he ignored is not the version he's dealing with now. You're not bitter, but you're not blind. You're not cold, but you're not naive. You're not desperate, but you're not closed. You're simply wise now. That wisdom shows through in how you speak. It shows when you ask the right questions instead of giving emotional speeches. It shows when you don't rush into plans with him. It shows when you listen more than you explain. A man respects what he cannot easily predict. He respects what he cannot manipulate. He respects what he must work for. And your response is the moment where he learns. Either he must rise to meet your standards, or he must accept that access to you is no longer guaranteed. A lot of women think the moment he returns is the moment to celebrate, but in reality, it's the moment to evaluate. Your response creates the foundation for whatever comes next. If you respond with desperation, he sees that he can come and go. If you respond with anxiety, he sees that he can affect your self-esteem. If you respond with too much excitement, he sees that your worth is dependent on his attention. But if you respond with calm, self-respect, and emotional balance, he sees that returning alone is not enough. He sees that he must show consistency, not convenience. He sees that he must show effort, not empty promises. He sees that in order to stay in your life, he has to do better than he did last time. And that shift, that moment where he realizes your response is rooted in strength, is where respect is either built or lost forever. So as you expand your understanding and respond when he comes back after ignoring you, remember that everything rests on these principles. Your silence already educated him. Your standards must guide you. Your value becomes clear, and your response shapes everything that follows. When a man comes back after ignoring you, the most powerful reminder you is that your silence already told him everything he needed to know. Silence is not just the absence of words, it is a presence of self-respect. It is a statement that says, I refuse to participate in my own mistreatment. When you go quiet, you remove access to your energy, your reassurance, your compassion, and your warmth. You remove the comfort he once relied on without ever earning. Silence forces him to feel they'll always be there. It's not revenge, it's revelation. It reveals who you really are without your emotions clouding the truth. And the truth is simple. You were the one adding value, you were holding things together, and you were the one investing while he took his time showing up. When you stopped showing up too, he finally felt the imbalance he created. And that feeling, that absence, is what pushed him to return. Not your words, not your explanations, not your pain, your silence. Silence teaches lessons louder than shouting, louder than confrontation, louder than begging. It teaches through experience, and experience is the only language some men truly understand. But when he returns and you find yourself face to face with the very person who once made you question your worth, this is where your standards must step into the spotlight. Emotions might want to run ahead. Your heart might feel a combination of relief, confusion, and lingering attachment. Your mind might replay what happened, trying to justify or soften the reality of how he treated you. But your standards are the guardians of your future. They stand between who you used to be and who you are becoming. A man can only access you at the level your standards allow. If your standards are soft, he returns soft. If your standards are low, he returns low effort. If your standards are firm, he returns understanding that he must rise. Standards don't block love, they protect love. They ensure that what you give doesn't get taken for granted again. So when he comes back, your job is not to fall back into comfort. Your job is to stay rooted in the version who learned something in his absence. You're not looking for perfect words. Any man can say anything when he feels lonely or temporarily concerned. You're looking for accountability, consistency, and proof through behavior. And the only way to get that proof is by letting your standards guide your response, not your emotions. Now, understand this truth deeply. A man values what he fears losing he wants, not what he casually enjoys. What he fears losing. Fear is what triggers effort. It triggers reflection. It triggers change. Men rarely transform when everything stays the same. They transform when the thing they never thought they'd lose suddenly feels out of reach. When you stop chasing, when you stopped reminding him of your presence, when you stopped making yourself emotionally available to someone who didn't offer the same in return, that's when he realized something important. He realized you weren't glued to him. He realized you weren't afraid of life without him. He realized your world didn't collapse because he disappeared. And that realization threatened his ego, his comfort, and his assumptions. Men don't fear losing a woman who waits for them. They fear losing the woman who replaces them with peace. Your independence is what brings him back. Your strength is what brings him back. Your lack of desperation is what brings him back. He didn't fear losing you before, but your silence changed that. And once he fears losing you, he approaches you differently, more attentive, more careful, more intentional. But you must observe whether this fear leads to real effort or temporary effort, because fear brings him back, but consistency keeps him there. And this leads to the fourth keynote. The response you choose determines the receive from him going forward. Respect isn't something you demand with attitude or emotion. It's something you command with presence. When he returns, he's watching your energy more than your words. He's looking for signs of whether you're the same woman who tolerated his behavior before. He's expecting you to be excited, flattered, forgiving, or eager. And that's exactly why your calmness is your most powerful tool. Calmness says you're in control. Calmness says you're not impressed by inconsistency. Calmness says you're evaluating, not chasing. When you respond calmly with emotional discipline, you shift the entire dynamic. You teach him that access to you isn't automatic, and that leaving you once already cost him something. Your response sets the tone, and the tone determines how he approaches you from that moment forward. If he senses desperation, he relaxes. If he senses anger, he argues. But if he senses strength, he straightens up. A woman who is calm and clear is a woman a man respects. Your response is not about hurting him, punishing him, or playing games. It's about showing him that you learned something he didn't expect you to learn. That you don't reward someone who made you feel unimportant. You don't rush back to someone who didn't rush back to you. You don't open your heart to someone who closed his communication. Your response is a reflection of your growth. And growth is what makes him realize that this time, if he wants to stay, he must put in more than words. He must put in real effort, real presence, and real consistency. Because once a woman learns her worth, nobody gets to treat her like an option again. When a man returns after ignoring you, the first thing you must remember is that your silence already shifted the entire dynamic. Silence is not passive. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy born from self-respect. When you didn't chase him, you sent a message without uttering a single word. That message was, I heard your absence louder than anything could have said. Your silence forced him to confront the reality he tried to avoid, that you are not a woman who falls apart just because someone walks away. Silence stripped him of the comfort he once felt. It removed the predictable responses he relied on. It erased the emotional safety net he assumed would always be there. When you went silent, he felt the weight of losing your energy, your time or attention, and your emotional investment. Men often don't realize the value of a woman's presence until that presence becomes unavailable. That's why silence is powerful, because it's one thing he can't argue with, can't negotiate with, and can't ignore. Silence makes him think. Silence makes him reflect. Silence makes him understand that ignoring you was not without consequence. And now that he's back, eager to rekindle a connection he once dismissed, your standards must stand taller than your emotions. Emotions make you remember the good moments. Emotions make you feel flattered by his return. Emotions try to convince you that this time might be different. But standards protect you from repeating the same chapters. Standards remind you what you deserve, not what you desire in the moment. Standards speak when your heart gets tempted. When a man returns after ignoring you, he usually brings charm, apologies, explanations, or warmth. Those are emotional triggers, but your standards aren't interested in charm. They're interested in consistency. They're not interested in excuses. They're interested in accountability. They're not impressed by temporary sweetness. They're impressed by long-term change. Your standards are the boundaries that decide whether he gets another chance or whether his return is just a moment of convenience for him. And if he truly wants to be in your life again, you must rise to the level of those standards. You must not step backward. You must not shrink. You must not soften because he suddenly remembered your value. Let your standards guide your conversations and guide your decisions. And speaking of value, you must understand this unshakable truth. A man values what he fears losing, not what is always available, not what is always patient, not what is always forgiving, but what he believes he may never get back. When you stop chasing, when you stop reaching out, when you stop giving energy to someone who gave you silence, he felt something he wasn't prepared for, the loss of a good woman. And men always remember the woman who walked away with dignity. He didn't come back because time magically changed him. He came back because the silence made him realize that while he was ignoring you, somebody else could value you. He came back because the version of you who went quiet became mysterious, unpredictable, stronger, unreachable. And men crave what feels out of reach. That's why your disappearance spoke louder than his. Your absence reminded him that the world doesn't revolve around him, that his choices affect his access. That ignoring you wasn't just a mistake. And that reality forced him to reevaluate what you meant to him. But even then, he might return for the comfort, the familiarity, the emotional support he once enjoyed. That's why you can't immediately confuse his return with his transformation. Fear brought him back, but effort will be the only thing that proves he's worthy of being back in your life. And that's where your response becomes the deciding factor. Because the response you choose determines the respect you will receive going forward. A lot of women think respect comes explaining how much he hurt them, or demanding apologies, or giving long speeches about their feelings. But respect doesn't come from emotional reactions. It comes from emotional control. When he reaches out, your response should reflect maturity and clarity. You don't need to rush. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to play hard to get, because you're not pretending. You're simply not easy to get anymore. A calm response shows him that your world doesn't spin around his decisions. A thoughtful response shows him that you value yourself and think before reacting. A measured response shows him that you're not here to repeat cycles. Men pay close attention to a woman's tone, not just her words. If you sound emotional, he thinks you still belong to him. If you sound desperate, he thinks he still has control. But if you sound grounded, steady, mature, and neutral, he realizes he's stepping into a different environment. One where he doesn't call the shots anymore. One where he doesn't hold the power. One where he must earn your respect again. Your response teaches him how to approach you. Your response sets the new rules. Your response redefines the dynamic. You're not angry, you're just evolved. You're not bitter, you're just aware. You're not closed off. You're just selective now. And a man respects a woman who is selective with her time, her energy, and her heart. When he senses that your response carries strength, not emotion, he learns that if he wants to stay this time, he has to bring more than promises. He has to bring consistency, honesty, and genuine effort. Because once a woman learns how to respond from strength, no man can ever treat her the same again.